If you've ever held a penny in your hand and thought it was just a small, ordinary piece of copper worth only 1 cent, then buckle up because today we're going to dive into a mind-bending tale of how a tiny coin from 1965, a humble 1-cent piece, has been valued at an eye-watering $4 million, not because it's made of gold or embedded with diamonds, but because of the incredible combination of errors, mistakes, and unique quirks that have turned it into a once-in-a-lifetime discovery that any collector would dream of owning. So let's settle in and peel back every layer of this remarkable story, starting with the fact that the year 1965 is already an unusual chapter in U.S. coinage history since it came right in the middle of one of the most significant transitions in the minting process. A time when the U.S. Mint was phasing out silver from circulating coins due to rising metal prices and public hoarding, a time when mint workers were under pressure to produce large volumes of coins quickly, which sometimes led to slip-ups, mechanical misalignments, planchet errors, and the occasional use of outdated dies. Now normally when we talk about a wheat penny we're thinking of coins struck from 1909 to 1958 with the iconic wheat ears on the reverse. But here's where the story takes a wild turn. Because the 1965 1-cent wheat penny should not even exist under normal circumstances since by that time the Lincoln Memorial design had been in place for several years. So the fact that a coin was struck in 1965 using the old wheat reverse die is already a major blunder in numismatic terms, suggesting that someone at the mint accidentally, or perhaps under unusual circumstances, loaded an obsolete reverse die from the 1950s into a press meant for striking new pennies, which would have been a serious procedural mistake given the mint's strict policies. But accidents like these, though rare, can and do happen, especially in high production years when quality control is stretched thin. And now, imagine that on top of this already significant historical anomaly, there were other striking errors like an off-center strike where part of the design is missing, a doubled die obverse where Lincoln's profile and the date might appear slightly shadowed or doubled due to die misalignment during the hubbing process, a repunched mint mark if it were from a mint that still used them manually, and perhaps even planchet imperfections such as lamination errors, cracks, or wrong metal strikes if a leftover copper planchet from a previous year or an experimental alloy found its way into the press. Each of these errors alone can make a coin worth hundreds or thousands of dollars to collectors. But combined in a single coin, and combined with the fact that the date itself falls into a year of numismatic turbulence, you have the perfect storm for an astronomical valuation. And this is what likely happened with the legendary 1965 wheat penny, the existence of which is not widely documented because coins like these often come to light decades after they were struck, discovered in old jars, inherited collections, or dusty boxes from estate sales. And when such a coin is authenticated by a top-tier grading service like PCGS or NGC, the numismatic world takes notice, driving up demand among elite collectors who know that owning a coin like this is not just about the metal or even the design, but about holding a tangible piece of minting history, an accident that should never have happened, and a rarity that might be unique or one of only a tiny handful. And the price tag of $4 million reflects not just the rarity but also the bidding wars among wealthy collectors who are willing to pay whatever it takes to secure a trophy coin for their cabinets. And as we imagine the details of this coin, picture the obverse showing Lincoln's bust with perhaps a subtle doubling in the lettering of Liberty, or the motto, "In God We Trust," with the date 1965. Crisp yet slightly misaligned, maybe shifted due to die rotation, while the reverse shocks the viewer with its wheat ears curving gracefully around the words, 1 cent, and United States of America. A reverse design that was supposed to have been retired 7 years earlier, and this design mismatch alone screams mint error of the highest order, the kind of mistake that makes collectors' hearts race. And beyond just the error, we have to consider the historical backdrop, because in 1965 the Mint was so focused on producing coins quickly to replace silver coins being hoarded that record-keeping on die usage might not have been as meticulous as in calmer times, and in this chaos, the accidental pairing of a wheat reverse with a 1965 obverse could slip through, especially if it was just a few strikes before the error was caught and corrected, meaning that perhaps only 1 or 2 coins escaped into circulation, and if those coins were kept safe, unspent, and eventually preserved in high-grade condition. They could easily command millions today, and that's before we even consider the psychological factor of rarity collecting, where a unique coin isn't valued based on logic alone but on the emotions, pride, and prestige of being the only person in the world to own it. And when you blend together the die variety aspect, the minting year's historical tension, the possible doubling, misalignment, and planchet errors, you get a recipe for the kind of coin that gets written about in numismatic journals, whispered about at coin shows, and fiercely contested at high-end auctions. And while skeptics might say that a penny could never be worth that much, history tells us otherwise, with several famous U.S. coins like the 1933 Double Eagle or the 1794 Flowing Hair dollar reaching multi-million-dollar prices for similar reasons of rarity and historical significance. And when it comes to a 1965 wee penny, we have something even more intriguing because it's not just an old coin, it's an anachronism, a time traveler from the 1950s appearing unexpectedly in the mid-60s, and that sense of mystery, how it came to be, how it slipped past the mint, where it traveled in the decades since, adds to the legend. And from a technical standpoint, the diagnostics that experts would look for include die markers like tiny scratches or chips in specific locations that match known dies from earlier wee pennies, along with metallurgical testing to confirm the planchet composition, which could reveal whether it was a leftover blank from an earlier run or a newly prepared planchet of the 1965 alloy. And in some cases, wrong planchet errors have made coins lighter or heavier than normal, which also excites collectors because it shows just how many things went wrong at once. And in auction catalogs, a coin like this would be described in breathless detail, noting the luster, the strike sharpness, the surfaces, the eye appeal, and the dramatic nature of the errors, and those descriptions alone can fuel bidding frenzies. And imagine the thrill of the person who first realized what they had, maybe pulling it from change at a grocery store decades ago, setting it aside because the reverse looked different, and later discovering that it was one of the rarest modern errors in existence. And stories like that inspire other collectors to check their own jars of pennies, because while most will never find a $4 million coin, the possibility fuels the hobby. And when we break down that $4 million figure, it's important to understand that it's not just a random number, it's based on precedent sales, scarcity, and the fact that once a unique coin sells, the next sale can go even higher if more than one deep-pocketed collector wants it. And this coin sits at the intersection of rarity, historical curiosity, mint era fascination, and sheer collector passion, which is why it has reached legendary status in numismatic circles. And the fascinating part is that such a coin is both incredibly fragile in value, since if another one appeared, it could slightly dilute the price, and yet also incredibly secure in its allure, because even if 2 or 3 examples were known, that's still vanishingly rare in a hobby where millions of coins are struck each year. And as we wrap our minds around the incredible journey of the 1965 wee penny, we see how something so small can carry a story so big, how a simple cent can become a multi-million-dollar artifact not by design but by accident, and how that accident, once recognized, becomes a treasure that connects us to a specific moment in minting history, a moment of human error, mechanical imperfection, and historical transition, all rolled into one tiny copper disc. And that is why, for the lucky owner of this 1965 wee penny, the coin isn't just a piece of money. It's a piece of history, a piece of mystery, and a piece of the collector's dream, worth far more than its weight in metal, worth the attention of the numismatic world, and, in this extraordinary case, worth a staggering $4 million. And it's these stories that keep the hobby alive, keep people searching through change, attending coin shows, poring over auction catalogs, and dreaming of finding that one coin that changes everything. And who knows, maybe someone watching this right now will be the next to uncover a forgotten treasure, proving once again that history, luck, and a sharp eye can transform the smallest things into the biggest surprises. Where the smallest details can make the biggest difference, and where sometimes a coin you might overlook as common pocket change could turn out to be worth a fortune. And today we are going to take you on an epic journey into the remarkable story of the 1981 cent coin, a humble Lincoln Memorial penny that has achieved legendary status among collectors and is valued at a staggering $2 million. Not because it is made of gold or encrusted with jewels, but because of a unique combination of minting errors, production quirks, and historical context that have made it one of the most desirable modern coins in existence. So if you've ever thought a penny was just a penny, you're about to have your mind changed forever as we peel back layer after layer of numismatic intrigue to understand exactly why this particular coin is worth more than most houses. And to start, we have to step back into the late 1970s and early 1980s when the United States Mint was producing Lincoln cents in massive quantities to meet national demand, still using the traditional copper alloy of 95% copper and 5% tin and zinc that had been in place for decades, but with the cost of copper rising steadily toward the point that it would soon exceed the face value of the coin, which would lead in 1982 to a dramatic switch to copper-plated zinc planchets weighing 2.5 grams instead of the older, heavier copper planchets at 3.11 grams. So the year 1980 sits in an interesting pre-transition period, still in full copper, but also in a time when mint technology had modernized compared to earlier decades, making significant errors less common but far more valuable when they did occur. And the coin at the center of our story today is a once-in-a-lifetime discovery because it combines several rare errors in one single strike, starting with the most visually dramatic. A double die obverse so bold and clear that the doubling is visible to the naked eye without magnification, affecting key elements like the date, the word liberty, and the motto I in God we trust. And for those unfamiliar, a double die is not caused during striking but during the creation of the die itself, when the hub imprints the design onto the die in more than one slightly misaligned impression, meaning every coin struck from that die will display the same doubling. And such dramatic doubled dies are avidly sought after by collectors, with famous examples like the 1955 doubled die cent fetching thousands even in circulated condition. But our 1980 cent takes things even further because in addition to this spectacular doubled die obverse, it was also struck on the wrong planchet, a rare and fascinating error that occurs when a coin blank intended for another denomination or even another country somehow ends up in the wrong press. And in this case, experts believe it may have been struck on a planchet intended for a foreign coin produced by the U.S. Mint under contract, possibly in a copper-nickel composition rather than the standard bronze, giving it a slightly different color, weight, and even ring when dropped. And wrong planchet errors are rare enough on their own to cause excitement. But the story doesn't end there, because this particular coin also exhibits an off-center strike, with the design shifted far enough to reveal a crescent of blank planchet along one edge while still showing the full date. An important factor, since collectors value errors more when the date is fully visible, and the off-center strike adds a dynamic, almost artistic quality to the coin, making it immediately recognizable as something unusual even to a casual observer. And to compound the rarity even further, close inspection under magnification reveals a subtle but distinct die clash, where the obverse and reverse dies have struck each other without a planchet in between, transferring faint outlines of the opposite design onto each die and subsequently onto struck coins, so you can see ghostly traces of the Lincoln Memorial on the obverse or hints of Lincoln's profile on the reverse. And such clash die coins are highly collectible for their insight into the minting process and the mechanical mishaps that can occur. And when you add all these factors together, the bold doubled die obverse, the wrong planchet, the off-center strike, and the die clash, you have a convergence of errors so statistically improbable that it borders on impossible, which is why only one confirmed example of this combination is known to exist, and its preservation in nearly perfect gem mint state with full original red copper luster makes it even more astonishing, because errors often occur early in a die's life and can be caught quickly, leading to few surviving examples, and those that do survive frequently suffer from circulation where that diminishes their appeal and value. But in this case, the coin appears to have been set aside immediately, perhaps by a mint employee or by the very first person to receive it in change, and stored carefully for decades before being submitted to a leading grading service like PCGS or NGC for authentication. And once encapsulated and certified as genuine, word of its existence spread quickly through the numismatic community, creating a buzz that only grew as specialists recognized the sheer unlikelihood of all these errors occurring together. And at auction, the combination of rarity, eye appeal, and error complexity drove bidding into the stratosphere until the hammer fell at $2 million, setting a record for a modern Lincoln Memorial cent. And while some might find it hard to believe that a penny from 1980 could be worth that much, those familiar with the hobby understand that the value is not in the metal but in the story, the uniqueness, and the demand among wealthy collectors who are willing to pay whatever it takes to own the only known example of something extraordinary, and to understand why they are willing to do this. We need to appreciate the psychology of high-end collecting, where owning a one-of-a-kind piece is about prestige, bragging rights, and the thrill of possessing something no one else can have. And in the world of error coins, the hierarchy of desirability often starts with visual impact, moves through rarity, and peaks when multiple major errors coexist in a single coin. Especially if the date is from a popular and widely collected series like the Lincoln cent, which has been in continuous production for over a century and has an enormous base of dedicated enthusiasts, and the 1980 cent ticks all these boxes and more, making it a numismatic trophy on par with famous rarities like the 1913 Liberty Head nickel or the 1804 silver dollar in terms of collector interest. And it also serves as a reminder that even in the era of modern minting with its automated processes and tight tolerances, perfection is an aspiration rather than a guarantee, and every once in a while a combination of human oversight, mechanical failure, and sheer chance produces something so unexpected that it becomes an instant legend. And for collectors, finding such a coin, or even seeing one in person, is a thrill akin to discovering buried treasure, and that's why the 1982 $1 million penny will forever have a place in the pantheon of great American coin rarities, inspiring both seasoned numismatists and newcomers to keep looking closely at the change in their pockets, because you never know when the next great era will reveal itself, silently waiting to be recognized, cherished, and perhaps even to rewrite the record books once again. And if you've made it this far into our journey, you can now fully appreciate that this is not just a coin, it's a piece of history, a mechanical accident turned work of art, a tangible lesson in the unpredictable beauty of imperfection, and above all a symbol of why the hobby of coin collecting endures and thrives, fueled by the hope that somewhere out there, in a roll of pennies or an old jar forgotten in a drawer, there might be another miracle like the 1980 cent, just waiting for the right person to discover it. Sometimes unbelievable world of rare coins and collectibles where the tiniest details can turn what looks like ordinary change into a life-changing discovery. And today we're taking an extended, all-encompassing journey into the incredible story of the 1980 1 cent coin that has reached a jaw-dropping valuation of $1.5 million. A figure that seems impossible for a coin you might expect to find in a pocket full of change, but is absolutely real when you understand the unique combination of minting errors, production quirks, and historical circumstances that have converged to create a once-in-a-lifetime rarity. So settle in, because we are going to peel back every layer of this remarkable numismatic treasure and explore exactly how it came to be, why it is so valuable, and what possibilities and scenarios might explain its existence. And to begin, we have to remember that in 1980 the Lincoln Memorial cent was well into its second decade of production, with the familiar portrait of Abraham Lincoln on the obverse and the stately depiction of the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse, and the Denver Mint, identified by its D Mint mark, was one of the busiest facilities in the United States, striking billions of coins to meet national demand, still using the pre-1982 copper alloy of 95% copper and 5% tin and zinc, each cent weighing 3.11 grams, and with such enormous production numbers, the minting process was highly automated. Yet even in these high-speed, modern conditions, errors could still occur, and when they did, the chance of a truly spectacular error escaping into the wild was minuscule, making such pieces immensely desirable when found. And the specific 1980 cent we're talking about today is such an extreme example that it has become almost mythical, combining several dramatic and highly sought-after error types into one single coin. Starting with the fact that it is a wrong planchet strike, meaning that instead of being struck on the normal copper cent blank, It was struck on a planchet intended for a different denomination entirely, possibly a foreign coin blank produced by the Denver Mint for another country's contract coinage, or even a domestic denomination like a dime or a small foreign bronze coin, resulting in a coin that has a slightly different weight and diameter than expected. And this alone is enough to get collectors' attention, but the surprises don't stop there, because this coin also exhibits a spectacular doubled die obverse, with the date 1980, the word Liberty, and the motto, In God We Trust, showing bold, clear doubling that is visible to the naked eye, not the kind of minor mechanical doubling that can happen from die bounce during striking, but true hub doubling caused during the creation of the die when it was impressed with the design more than once in slightly misaligned positions, creating a shadowed or doubled appearance in the design elements, and this type of doubled die is one of the most collectible varieties in U.S. coinage history, as seen with the legendary 1955 doubled die cent and others that fetch high prices even in circulated condition. And now imagine that this doubled die obverse was paired with an off-center strike, where the coin's design is noticeably shifted away from the center, leaving part of the blank planchet visible as a crescent-shaped area while still keeping the full date intact, which is a major plus for collectors who want the error to be dramatic yet still clearly dated. And to make this combination even more jaw-dropping, experts have noted that the reverse shows evidence of a die clash, where the obverse and reverse dies struck each other without a planchet in between, transferring faint, ghost-like images of the opposing design onto each die and then onto coins. So you might see the outline of Lincoln's profile faintly on the reverse or hints of the memorial on the obverse, adding a layer of minting history to the piece. And as if that were not enough, there is also evidence of a partial collar strike, meaning that the coin was not fully seated in the retaining collar during striking, allowing the metal to expand slightly outward and giving the rim a broad-struck appearance on one side, which in error collecting terms adds yet another fascinating dimension to the coin's story. And the statistical probability of all these major errors, wrong planchet, bold doubled die obverse, off-center strike with full date, die clash, and partial collar, occurring on a single coin and then surviving in high grade is almost zero. Yet here we have a verified example, authenticated and encapsulated by a top-tier grading service like PCGS or NGC, preserved in virtually pristine condition with full red copper luster, minimal marks, and razor-sharp details on the areas that were properly struck. And the chain of custody of such a coin often adds to its mystique, perhaps discovered originally in a bankroll by a sharp-eyed collector in the early 1980s, or maybe set aside by someone at the mint who recognized it as special, then quietly passing through a few private hands before emerging in a major auction decades later, where word of its existence caused a frenzy among high-end collectors and error specialists. And when you combine its uniqueness with the huge base of Lincoln cent enthusiasts, the bidding escalated quickly, finally settling at $1.5 million, a price that reflects not only the coin's absolute rarity but also the intense demand for spectacular, visually dramatic mint errors. And in the psychology of elite collecting, owning a piece like this is about far more than its monetary value. It's about prestige, bragging rights, and the knowledge that you possess something literally no one else in the world has. And when we examine why errors like this occur, we can only speculate because the mint does not typically release detailed reports on individual mistakes. But it's possible that a bin of foreign planchets was mistakenly fed into a press set up for Lincoln cents, that the die in that press happened to be a newly created doubled die, that a misfeed caused an off-center strike, that a jam in the press led to a die clash, and that the collar mechanism failed partially at the moment of striking, and the odds of all those events aligning are astronomically small. Which is why the resulting coin is so spectacular, and beyond its value in dollars, it serves as a teaching tool for the minting process, illustrating multiple error types in one tangible object, and for those lucky enough to see it in person, it's a breathtaking reminder that even in a modern, highly controlled minting environment, perfection is an aspiration rather than a guarantee, and once in a very great while, the imperfections that slip through are so remarkable that they become legends. Talked about in coin clubs, studied in numismatic journals, and chased by the most determined collectors, and the 1980 D1 cent valued at $1.5 million is one of those legends, a coin that embodies the thrill of the hunt and the hope that somewhere, in someone's pocket change, another miracle might be waiting to be found, and it's that hope and that thrill that keep the world of coin collecting alive, vibrant, and endlessly fascinating for new generations of treasure hunters.